Coming up today on the Locked On Hornets podcast, we'll talk about the Hornets-Lakers game being postponed due to the wildfires in the LA area. What kind of impact does that have on the Hornets schedule? And we'll take a look ahead with some Sicko Satchel questions. It's all today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. There's Doug Branson. You can find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Also find him hosting Locked On NBA, and you can find him a bunch of different places. He kind of pops out like Waldo does. There he is. There's Doug. There's Doug. Everywhere is Doug. You can find his subtext information on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. He's also writing the newsletter because your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Hornets Daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Hornets newsletter. And I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. So the Hornets-Lakers game postponed due to the wildfires. We'll read some of the stuff here from Adam Silver in a statement. Also, NBA.com has this write-up that because of the ongoing wildfires in the Los Angeles area, the game is postponed. The date for the rescheduled game will be announced at a later time. The NBA also wants to make sure that people know the NBA family sends its thoughts and support to the community of Los Angeles during this challenging time. And they're grateful for the thousands of local firefighters, first responders who have demonstrated enormous bravery. Our prayers remain with those affected by the unimaginable devastation caused by the wildfires. So this we knew was going to be an extreme possibility, even a probability, as there was still a lot of damage going on closer to game time. Now I think you also have a real threat of this game against the Clippers on Saturday also being postponed, because there was a game Monday in the NFL playoffs that was supposed to take place also in LA that has been moved to a different site. I believe
in the same neighborhood, right?
That's right.
I think both the
Inglewood.
Rams stadium is Inglewood. Yeah.
Yep. So right, exactly. So now in the NFL, they're going to have that playoff game that was going to be in Inglewood where the Rams played. Now it's actually going to be hosted in Glendale, Arizona. But point being, that game's going to be Monday. And so if there's a game Saturday in the same neighborhood, you would have to imagine that that game probably won't happen either. So with all the important caveats to mention, while necessary, but also important and understood caveats, that everything basketball comes secondarily to the devastation taking place. It's some real scary stuff. Honestly, it's really hard to look, but imagine living through it. Unfortunately, we had our own local natural disaster with Hurricane Helene hitting the western part of the state. And so it's not like we're all too unfamiliar. So maybe you can apply that to what people are experiencing on the West Coast and understand the devastation that they're going through right now. It's some really, really scary stuff. It was clearly the right call by Adam Silver and the NBA to postpone these games, at least the first one that's already happened. I have to imagine it's going to happen with this Hornets-Clippers matchup, but it's unreal what's going on right now. And certainly the Locked On family, I have to imagine also, we send out all the positive vibes, all the good thoughts, all the help as much as we can, because it's rough. And we have some Locked On family that lives out there and hosts some podcasts out in that area as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the only thing we can do here is take a look at this schedule and see what it means for the Hornets moving forward. What are the domino effects if you lose both of these games in LA and they eventually get made up? I imagine that would happen, closer to the spring. And so you're going to be playing LA teams that they're battling kind of in the middle of the Western Conference. I don't think either of these teams are going to have things locked up until the very end. So these games probably remain competitive, maybe even more competitive for the Hornets as you get later into the season. It does save them a back-to-back, because this was going to be a Saturday, Sunday, Clippers-Suns back-to-back. So the Suns are next, so you get a little interesting home and home that you didn't plan for, and you get some big rest.
So yeah, the schedule with it, I mean, it is wild, right? Because now it's not like we've seen this a ton with the NBA. You know, I can remember in California, wildfires have been a thing. So I can remember when the Chargers were in San Diego and they were at Qualcomm Stadium for all you NFL nerds out there. Yes, Qualcomm, Qualcomm. I don't know, but they were at that stadium, and I remember that they've.
I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I don't think it's either of the.
That's right. No, it's actually Jones Arena, Walker. It's
actually Qualcomm.
Anyways, there were some fires back in I think not even a decade ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, that also forced them. So the NFL, because of what they've experienced before, they've actually had some backup plans for this. I am interested to see how the NBA is going to operate. It's not like this is completely unprecedented to have a game postponed, but I am interested with 2 games, right? This is what you do. You kind of double up with the LA squads, especially for the Eastern Conference teams that make the West Coast road trip. So now, how is this going to affect the Hornets? Is it a delayed issue, right? Because when you have a back-to-back, clearly that doesn't help the team that is playing on the back-to-back. So is it just erased altogether, or do you just delay this issue, right? Do they have to experience this a little bit later on down the road? I don't know, but I guess it'll be interesting to see.
Leagues always figure this out somehow. I mean, didn't you have some crazy makeup games that had serious playoff implications in Major League Baseball, and they somehow figured that out?
Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe the Mets game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so they figure it out. If I were advising any of these leagues, I would say these kinds of natural disasters don't seem to be calming down. So I would look into how to maybe save some space in future seasons for these kind of makeup events. I mean, you've got teams down in Miami and other teams in Florida with hurricanes. And so, I think this is just a reality that leagues are going to have to experience. And I've even said before, as we kind of get deeper into this thing and you're trading with Miami for, 2030, 2035 future draft picks, some of these GMs might have to take into consideration, will Miami be afloat at that point?
Oh my God,
So,
I know. Yeah, you're
sorry, I didn't mean to take it to a dark place, but that's the reality.
You know what's unfortunate is that was such a joke that people went with. It was a lot more lighthearted 5 years ago when we went with that joke. And
I don't even mean it as a joke anymore. That's the thing that I'm saying. I'm not even trying to make light of anything. It's I think serious considerations are going to have to be made in professional sports. And when there's a lot of money involved for these kinds of things.
That's exactly my point, is that it was much more lighthearted. It used to be, when Miami's underwater, they'll have the first overall pick. Now it's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Side note, just real quickly, I know this isn't Locked On NFL, but we've talked about basketball is an indoor sport, so it's not going to be affecting the Charlotte Hornets nearly as much. But it is interesting when we talk about drafting these quarterbacks that might throw the football better in cold weather because they're just more physically gifted. How much do you care about that anymore in Lambeau Field because it's warm in late November? So now we got a month. When you get to the postseason, that's when you have to deal with it. But anyways, some interesting yet devastating consequences to talk about. So unfortunate there.
So let's pivot awkwardly to the situation that the Hornets find themselves in, which is they get a big rest here that they did not expect. And so I did some diving and looked at how the team has performed this year on rest, because my just gut feeling was that they've failed a few times when they've had big rests, because they got a few opportunities at that with the NBA Cup scheduling. It gave several teams that didn't make the NBA Cup tournament some big rest days. But actually, if you look at it, the Hornets, they get pretty much blown out in back-to-back opportunities this season. It's like a double-digit efficiency drop when it's 1 day rest. And then 2 day rest, it gets a little bit better. You're getting into the single-digit efficiency drops. And then on 3 days rest, they're actually 3-2 in 5 games. That leads the league. They're tied with Phoenix, Miami, Cleveland, Sacramento, Boston, Washington, and Chicago with days with 3+ rests, or games with 3+ days rest.
Yep.
And they're 3-2 in those games, and it's only the Hornets, and they're only a minus 3.8 efficiency drop, according to NBAstuffer.com that keeps up with this stuff. So it is a pretty steep decline from they get killed on back-to-backs versus when they have a lot of rest, the Hornets actually do perform better.
How much here's one question for you. How much of it is it rest and how much of it is game planning and lack of preparation? I wonder how much of it is, okay, we have a couple of days to prepare for this opponent rather than only having 18 hours in, we got to sleep, so like we have to prepare for this opponent a little differently when you don't have a large margin for error and you're such a young team that doesn't have as much talent. One, you could say, oh, well, this favors the young guys. They're full of energy. It's fine. Like LaMelo's 23 and he's one of the vets on the squad. Yeah, this is going to be a fine thing for them, except that they need all the preparation that they can get before they get ready for an opponent that might be older, but they know how to play the game. I just wonder what the effect is. What is more detrimental? What's more beneficial to them and the opposition? Is it the actual rest, which is what we highlight when we call them rest days, or is it the preparation? How many preparation days do you get? I think that's kind of an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and they've got a number of them this season, a high number of them. In fact, it's been preparation H all season long for the Charlotte Hornets.
Preparation H. Let's move on. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
I want to say the other line. I want to
Don't do it. You've got a career to think about.
Why don't you call it? All right, I'm kidding. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Second All-Star game voting results. They are here. And LaMelo continues to climb in the voting results. So we'll have LaMelo conversation coming up next. In terms of, is he a shoo-in to get into the All-Star game? Is it still going to be a little iffy, even if he is leading all the Eastern Conference guards? We'll talk about that coming up next, LOH.
Who throws a shoe?
Honestly. This episode is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers, no more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20 forms, TurboTax experts give you your taxes, they give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing what your taxes are, that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today to get matched with an expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, All-Star voting results, round 2. They're in, Doug, and they continue to favor LaMelo Ball among all the other Eastern Conference guards. LaMelo leads the way at almost 1.5 million votes rolling in. Just to be specific, he has 1,490,227 votes. Donovan Mitchell, 300,000 back of him. Damian Lillard, about 480, 460 back of him. So he's got a pretty sizable lead. Jalen Brunson is 4. Trae Young is 5. Trae Young has 540,000 votes. So LaMelo almost has 1 million more votes than the 5th place getter here, Doug, which is, look, it shows you LaMelo has a ton of fans. They've shown up for him. I think his play also, when he's been on the court, he's been real fun. This is what I talked about in a solo episode when the first round of results came in. Doug, I think primacy bias is also a real thing. And we talked about it when discussing some of these accolades. The beginning of the season, that matters a little bit more so than the second iteration of the season. The first 20 games, the first 15 games even, that carries a lot of weight in how people react to how you play, right? Because everybody's been waiting for the NBA season to roll around for quite some time. So now, with so many eyeballs watching, who is grabbing the storylines right away, who is impressing, especially with somewhat of a surprise, quote unquote, but it's been out of sight, out of mind for LaMelo for quite some time. People forget LaMelo's a bucket. as the kids say. And so they were reminded when LaMelo was like top 3 in scoring. I think you mentioned he was number 1 in scoring yesterday on Wes and Walker. You should listen to it.
I said he was earlier in the season.
Yeah,
I think Shea has overtaken him at this point.
No, but right, like there was a little bit earlier in the season, right? So the primacy bias, the support, the popularity, the flair, the showtime of it all, I think that all goes into why he's leading all Eastern Conference guards in All-Star votes at this point.
Yeah, 300,000 votes separate him and Donovan Mitchell, but he's still behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for overall guard votes. Shai has 1.8 million, and LaMelo has just under 1.5 million. What's interesting to me is that 1.5 million vote total, if he were a front court player in the West, would put him 6th. Like, how are people voting for this? Are they just like going in and voting for a few front court players and then dipping? Like they don't fill out the rest of the ballot? What are you people doing? I don't understand how this works. Because like Nikola Jokic has 2.2 million, Kevin Durant 1.9 million. The front court players in the East, same thing. Giannis 2.7, Jason Tatum 2.2, Karl Anthony Towns 1.8. I don't get. Maybe it's just a splitting of the vote in the guard category, and that's probably helped LaMelo too, right? I mean, the fact that Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are doing great things, but one of them hasn't totally outpaced the other in Cleveland. That matters. The fact that they're in Cleveland and not maybe a higher profile market like New York or I don't know. I mean, what are the high profile? Boston. I mean, Boston doesn't have it's all front court, right? They don't have a guard that's like dominating for them. So all of these things, plus LaMelo's social impact, you said, as the kids say, it has been the kids propelling LaMelo Ball. I just think it's unfortunate how much he's getting killed in the media for the Hornets not winning, because it's like that's not even remotely LaMelo's fault, right? He shouldn't have to pay for the sins. He's been loyal to the extent that he took the max contract and decided not to make a stink and go somewhere else. I mean, that benefited him tremendously, but you know, he's been loyal to the city of Charlotte, and the team has not repaid him as of yet with like serious talent around him to get him to the playoffs like they should have done. And that's not his fault. And I just think he's played at a level that maybe he doesn't deserve to be like the number 1 overall vote getter, but he certainly deserves to be an all-star. And I think how much he's getting killed, and will get killed, by the way, in the media vote. I think the only thing that saves him he becomes the second starter if players who have traditionally wanted to just be anti-media and stiff-arm the media anyway, just give an FU vote to the media and say, no, actually we are putting LaMelo Ball as a starter.
You know, again, in that solo episode, I kind of went on a rant against it. Just the vitriol and how people react to LaMelo being a leading vote getter among the Eastern Conference guards. It's so ridiculous. There's
too many people in the media that hate fun. I saw a tweet I saw a tweet by Nate Duncan that was talking about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and how much he pushes off. And it's like, if that's your take from watching what Shai has been able to do over the course of his career, but particularly this season when he is putting MVP numbers up, if that's your takeaway, like pick a new sport. Like you don't care about fun. You don't care about watching great players play. I don't know what you care about anymore. Maybe you just care about numbers. I don't know. But just like get out of here with that stuff.
Well, and plus don't do this to Shai. Like, look, James Harden, Trae Young, okay, fine. Like, those guys are foul merchants. I get it. Shai is fun. Like, we are trying to uplift. We have a young star here, okay? Like, we're trying to have somebody. He's been in top 5 in MVP voting the past couple of seasons. He could just be the lead MVP vote getter right now. Now he pushes off with his elbow a little too much when he creates, quote, separation. That was the argument. But you're right. Like, it was, look, man, it's crazy because what are we doing with the fan vote if we just argue about what the fans want? It's not like they're voting in someone that doesn't deserve to be in the All-Star game. I said this too. If your argument is that Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson deserve to be ahead of him, then okay, fine. Just in terms of being an all-star, who's had a better season, whatever. But LaMelo, one, doesn't fall any less than third on this list. Like, he's having a better season. I guess Damian Lillard is having a better season the last like 5 games or so with how he's playing. But the numbers with LaMelo are still good enough. But it's not like we're uplifting this, 6th man off of the bench because everybody loves his social media account. LaMelo is deserving, and he's getting the votes in a Showtime fun event. The fans are participating in the showtime and the fun, and now people are ruling against it. It's just so stupid.
Yeah, so this whole system where you have 25% of the players, 25% to the media, and 50% to the fans was instituted after fans kind of ruined this for themselves by troll voting Zaza Pachulia into the All-Star game. I don't know if you remember that.
But the players couldn't handle it either, right? Like we know
the players messed it up too.
Yeah.
So, that's why the media gets in here. But the problem with the media is that there's so many people that have like agendas in terms of how they feel like the NBA game should be played. And it's the whole problem, and this wasn't media generated, but it's also a problem. This is just a rant segment for me, Doug Ranson. I have a problem with the ethical basketball idea of like, don't go to the free throw line or whatever. Not because like, I do agree that some players take advantage of the free throw line too much, but that's not the players' fault. They're just trying to look for advantages. The NBA should clean up how the game is officiated rather than telling players how to play. But the whole idea of ethical basketball, the whole idea of there being a right way to play basketball and a wrong way to play basketball, I think is silly. I think is absurd. Like there's got to be multiple ways you can do this thing, and I think the NBA should celebrate fun whenever possible, particularly with LaMelo Ball, because he's also excelling at the game of basketball.
Oh my God.
He's having fun and excelling at the game, and it's ridiculous that we can't celebrate that. There's nothing wrong with saying, okay, LaMelo Ball, the number one guard in the East, I don't know about that, but da-da-da-da-da. But that's not what's happening. He's just getting torched in the media because the Hornets aren't winning, and that's not his fault.
You put it well on Wes and Walker yesterday. You said just because we saw a mature game from him against the Suns, it doesn't mean that it can't be a fun game just because it's mature. And I think people have a hard time separating those two.
Showtime. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. We love talking about the past and venerating the past and being nostalgic about Showtime Lakers. We love that. But then when it happens in our present, oh no, all of a sudden, no, button up. We got to play the game the right way. We got to do that. No, it's absurd. And this is the whole thing. We can't appreciate what's happening in the present. We can only love it when it's in the past.
You know what? You know what I love that is both past and present is Hubie Brown, right? Like you could not be more past in the present space in the NBA than Hubie Brown, who celebrates this type of stuff. Like there's that fun clip on Twitter where he's showing kids how to do a behind the back pass because it's useful. Right? Like he's like, look, everybody wants to say, oh, Pistol Pete, what are you doing? Bringing that behind the back pass into the NBA. What are you doing? LaMelo Ball now bringing that behind the back pass. It's so much fun throwing it off the backboard, creating a thud. But like, hey, how about LaMelo? LaMelo throwing it off the backboard led to foul shots. LaMelo throwing it off the backboard, wild freaking play. The whole stadium erupts with the backboard thud echo. And you know what happens? LaMelo catches it, hockey assist it to Mark Williams, who almost dunks it, except he gets fouled. Like, so, okay. Fun ass play, useful play, right? Like it's wild. And yet it's funny that we just don't celebrate that anymore. And that even if you don't celebrate it, when you fight so hard against it, I think that's my issue. Yeah. If you don't have to celebrate it if you don't want to, I guess, if you're just so against fun. But why are you fighting hardcore against it? That's the issue.
So two final things. One, I did see some research that showed that as you get older, if you're less get off my lawn and more appreciative of what's happening in the world and appreciative of what younger people are doing and how things are improving. If your mind is focused on that and less on get off my lawn, then your mental acuity hangs around. Your ability to just function cognitively is better than if you just sort of sink into the world of everything was better back in my day.
Makes so much sense.
So that's number one. So just take that and do with that what you will. The second thing that I want to say is that LaMelo, unfortunately, doesn't give a bleep about the media narratives, and he doesn't play the game, and he doesn't try to lobby with the media or try to put on any airs such that media would be more likely to give him a pass in these types of situations. And we have seen other players be on bad teams, play well, but they just kind of, they converse with the media. They're more available, both when they're actually talking and just more available generally to talk. LaMelo hasn't done that. And I'm not even sliding Melo. It's just like, because I don't even know if he cares about starting in the All-Star game or not. So, we might be talking about something here that he doesn't even care about, but that's just sort of the reality of the situation.
All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Instead of old man get off our lawn, I think we were young men get off our lawn. That's how we should describe that segment, because we both ranted quite a bit there.
No, get on my lawn. I'm tired of people. Yeah, no, too many people are getting off my lawn. I'd like them to get on my particular lawn.
I got plenty of lawn chairs, dude. Come have a cold one. Let's hang out. That's it. All right. Coming up next. Yeah. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast, we go through the Sicko Satchel. Got some good questions in there. We attempt to answer them coming up next. LOH. This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. It's probably still going on, to be honest with you. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. Rocket Money makes it so easy to track all of them down, and it's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your own savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. $500 million. That's crazy. Saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. You can use it to cancel services that you're not using anymore. And you could have already saved a ton had you been on Rocket Money a little bit earlier. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions. Reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Don't waste any more time. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Sicko Satchel, baby. I'm ready for what kind of crazy player divisions these questions are coming from. Othella Harrington division, Briante Weber division, Primoz Brijek, Tamar Slay. Tell me, feed me. I need Sicko Satchel questions.
Yeah, if you are a member of the Sicko Brigade, join subtext.com/Locked On Hornets. Make sure you let me know what your favorite oddball, Bobcat, or Hornet is so that I can mention it on the show. Or NBA player. I'll open it up. If you don't want to do a Bobcat, if that's too painful for you, I understand the trauma of it all. If you just want to go old school NBA player, oddball NBA player, hit me up there so that I can put it in the notes so that I can mention it when we do your questions here. The Sicko Satchel is our version of the mailbag segment, and it is exclusively for Sicko Brigade members. Join subtext.com/Locked On Hornets. Okay, Rocky from Salisbury wants to know, while this season is not going how most of us would have expected with this many games under the belt, what are at least 3 things the Hornets could get better at that are not connected to health? Okay,
I know you got some stats for me, Doug. You've been so on it here lately. What are some things you think you got? Oh, my bad.
Scramble time. Quick.
Okay, even if you don't have the stats, even if you don't, what are some things that you think they could get better at in 3 separate areas?
Well, I don't need any stats to tell you that they're not shooting the basketball well from anywhere. I think that's sort of a point that gets lost in all this. It's not just about 3-point shooting. Teams that can shoot, like if you go and look at Boston, who shoots a ton of threes, they play well in the mid-range too. Like teams that shoot well, just shoot well everywhere. They hit it at the rim, they hit it in mid-range, and they hit it from 3. Because a lot of times if you're hitting well from 3, certain teams are going to decide, all right, we're going to give up the rim and we're going to really double team the best players, and we're going to close out on all the shooters and force you off the line. And if they have a good shot blocker, if that defense has a good shot blocker, then you're going to be taking some mid-range shots on a given night. And these teams can hit those too. The Hornets cannot. I mean, they just don't have good mid-range shooters. They don't have good ISO shooters. They don't have good 3-point shooters. And when they get to the rim, they better get fouled because they're not hitting from there either. So, I mean, that's one area. And I don't know how you get better at that other than bringing in some shooters or just hoping that you get off the schneid a little bit. But they're not. If you look back at that last 40-plus win season that they got blown out in the play-in, and I think we've gone over these stats before, like you could look at the top 8 or 9 players from that roster, and they were all points per shot attempts above average. And if you look at this team, the players that handle the ball most, apart from LaMelo Ball, the players that handle the ball most on this team are some of the worst efficient offensive players the team has. So.
Yeah. So, and just to back some more of what your point is, I mean, you look at them in terms of frequency. I'm using cleaning the glass, which neglects the garbage time stats, but Charlotte is towards the bottom in the league in accuracy when shooting threes, but they are number 3 in the league when it comes to frequency in shooting threes. That is not a good recipe. When you shoot a lot of the shots that you miss a lot of, then that's going to be really hard to win games, and it's why offensively they've been so challenged.
You know what's interesting about that, too? I was looking at their game log to see how the three-point shot has trended over the season, and it's amazing they're still that high because they really the three-point shot attempts have fallen off, particularly in that period when LaMelo was hurt and several guys were hurt. They were not shooting as many threes. And so really, it's like if you look at that pocket of games, first 10 or so games of the season, they just shot so many three-point shots that it has still buckled the numbers a little bit. But you're seeing that number start to tick up, by the way. The last 2 or 3 games, that number's getting back up there. And again, that's healthy team. You've got a few more shooters available to you. So I don't expect that trend to go back down.
That and the Bulls game helps both of those stats that I just spoke about. The amount of threes.
It doesn't help the accuracy. It certainly helps the frequency.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It helps them be a low team in terms of efficiency, yet high team in terms of volume. Just play Chicago, and they'll be right where they are right now all season long. I think another thing that Charles Lee talked about, we saw them win against Phoenix because they were good in transition. They had been one of the slower teams in all of the NBA. That's still true overall, but they've actually climbed a little bit on NBA.com. They're ranked 23rd in pace, but you saw that pick up against the Suns. I think with LaMelo just being someone that, if used correctly, I think is just a one-man catalyst for transition offense. He can. We've seen him do the quarterback pass. We've seen him do the underhand granny 75-foot pass to Gordon Hayward in the short corner, for God's sake. Like he's going to find ways to get out ahead of the defense. So a healthy LaMelo, a healthy in rhythm LaMelo with his running mates. I think all of those things are important to pace, but all of that being true, I think just getting faster. So it's fixing itself right now, I believe. I hope that they continue that trend, but they're still towards the bottom in rankings because they've already set a foundation. So if they continue to improve there, I think that's going to go a long way.
Yeah, I think they have to get more of the players that are currently on the roster more comfortable with starting transition opportunities off misses. Because that's what the good teams that actually push the pace and are efficient in transition, because you can push the pace. I think any team has the ability to push the pace. But if all 5 of your guys can't grab the ball immediately and run down, your transition opportunities are going to be worse if you're passing one time to get in a transition and the opposing team's defense can actually just get a little bit more set. I mean, the teams that kill you in transition are the teams where the center can start the break, the power forward can start the break, anybody can start it, and you don't need that extra pass or, just that half second to find where LaMelo is. You don't need, they shouldn't need that. And so maybe they can do some player development there to help that. Maybe that's happening in Greensboro with some of the guys that are working down there. It's tough to do that, I think, midseason. I think that's more on Jeff Peterson to find more players, big or small, that can handle the basketball enough to get it across half court and start something.
And last thing for me, just another area too. This is the area I'm a little concerned about because it's been such a problem with who the team is. So I don't know if this can be fixed with certainly this iteration of the roster, but they just aren't hitting shots at the rim. Now, I do think they're 29th according to Cleaning the Glass in terms of shooting accuracy at the basket. But Mark Williams is towards the top in the league. And this is what me and Rod talked about. Rod Morrow joined me when you were out at the beginning of the year. We talked about Mark just being available for some of these slip passes from LaMelo. Like, I do think Mark really did play a lot better, certainly, than what he did against Cleveland and Phoenix, because you're right. Those were bad games. But before that, I do think he was playing quite well, and I think he was helping this team quite a bit and just creating some easy shots, right? They just didn't have penetrate, kick to a guy that's taller than everyone and can slam it home. Against Phoenix, offensively, just kind of forgot how to basketball for a little bit, with some hot potato passes coming in. Like, he just couldn't handle the heat on some of those passes. It was a bad game offensively, but like Mark, they're even utilizing him in the passing game a lot more. Like, they're running their offense through him. His assist percentage, it has skyrocketed, Doug. Like, it has skyrocketed compared to what it used to be. So, like, having Mark figuring this stuff out, the offensive rebound percentage, it's up again with him there. So I don't know, like, healthy Mark, just opening some things up with the offense. We talk about him defensively all the time, but I think he matters. A good version, a healthy version of Mark, he matters a lot to this team offensively as well.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree. And look, game on Sunday against Phoenix, you get a second chance to have a decent game. I think he's going to be important to the effort because it'll be interesting to see what Lee does, right? Do you go with the same game plan? Do you try to shut down KD, let Devin Booker get what he wants, and try to work on taking Beal away when he comes off the bench? Or do you maybe attack Booker this time to throw him off the game? Maybe they're expecting KD to get top locked by Miles Bridges. And so there's going to be some little chess moves here, I think, some counter moves by both of these teams. So it'll be interesting to watch that. Final question here. I want to just package these two questions together. Very quick answer before we get out of here, because I did promise that we would get to all these questions, and I want to. This is the one promise that I want to keep. So this is from Evan and 302 from the Othello Harrington division, and it centers around trading Miles Bridges. Evan asks, who is the worst player you would trade Miles Bridges for right now? And 302 asks, can we please trade Miles and start Tijon? So answer one, both of those, or just open it up to some Miles Bridges conversation.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's hard on the fly to answer when you're at the top of the league in terms of talent. When we did this with LaMelo, like, maybe it's a little bit easier in terms of who's the worst player you would trade LaMelo for. With Miles, God, we're going like what?
But does it even? So let me throw a question to Evan's question that I think will help you answer it. Does the player you get back matter?
That's a good question.
In a scenario when you're trading Miles Bridges, are you looking at the player aspect of it, or are you looking at the asset aspect of it when that kind of deal happens?
I don't think it doesn't matter at all, because there's a world where you could get something in return in the form of an asset that's already grown arms and legs for you that can help you. So I get your point. If you just traded Miles for strictly draft picks and then whatever the salary filler is, okay, that's fine.
I'm good with that. That's what I'm saying. I'm good with that. Now, if they maybe they take less assets and they happen to come up with a young player that's not going, it's going to be a worse player by measurements, because it's going to be a young player that you're sort of betting low on. Like, I'm cool with that too. I don't have any really names in mind, but I think, to me, this is all about any Miles Bridges deal. You would be helping, I think, at this point, with how difficult it is for teams to trade in the second apron. Miles Bridges is getting moved not to a team that needs Miles Bridges necessarily, like that's the target. It's going to be moved to a team by virtue of a 3 or 4 team deal to facilitate a Butler move or a Zion move or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you just trade for a style of player that fits the system a little more. Do you get a shooter
Tobias
back?
Harris?
Do you get a shooter back?
Do we finally do the Tobias Harris thing? They drafted him initially. Yeah. Do you finally do that?
David Walker is twitching somewhere at just the very notion of Tobias Harris. But with Miles, I will say, man, he's played really hard. Miles has played really hard. If you care about the establishing the right kind of culture with on the court, we know all of the stuff off the court. It still matters, right? To say culture in Miles Bridges, I get it. That's certainly seemed, and it's been true, for that to have been an oxymoron. The on-court competitive nature of diving for the loose ball, of continuing to get into the paint rather than settling for shots, I do think in a basketball sense he's helped this team with the right kind of attitude on the court. So you'd be giving that up, just point blankly. You'd be giving that up. At the same time, like, this is still not a team that can say no to a good return and trading for Miles Bridges. It doesn't mean I don't want to trade him. Just calling a spade, you'd be trading something that has helped you this season.
Yeah, like I don't envision Miles Bridges as a part of a Charlotte Hornets playoff, like outright playoff team, playoff contender. I mean, I'm continuing to envision Miles Bridges as a player that's going to help them with a lot of those intangibles, be a probably below average efficient player on the court, but on a given night can go off and then give you maximum effort on the defensive end, which has helped this team stay around in games when they've been awful offensively. They've also been great defensively. Miles Bridges is a big part of that. I would actually put the likelihood of him getting traded at the deadline pretty low at this point. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of action at the deadline, and so I think Miles, that again, it's sort of a situation with Nick Richards, right? That contract that's attractive now is only going to get more attractive as the years come off. And I think the Hornets' big move is still ahead of them, and Miles Bridges could be a part of making that move happen. I don't think you want to waste that.
Yeah, you're saying save him for the big move rather than trading him for still what could be a good return.
Because you're going to have to money match, because you're going to have to send 4 picks and money match if you take on a guy with a big contract already. And so Miles's dollar amount is going to allow you to do that.
Yeah, like what the dollar amount for what you would consider a tradable contract, a good contract, it goes up every year. Like here's Miles making over $20 million. It descends, and then even at its lowest value, it still is above $20 million, and we're still calling it a good value, good tradable contract, which is just where we are in the NBA. All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods. That does include YouTube. Make sure you check out everyhornetsboxscore.com. Make sure you check out Locked On NBA as well. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. We'll see what we're talking about on Monday. Again, they're scheduled to play the Clippers on Saturday. I can't imagine that game does happen with it happening in with it being scheduled in Inglewood, playing at the Clippers home arena. So we'll see. But have a good weekend regardless, and we'll be back with you to recap whatever happens on Monday.
Oh, behave.